Hello, hello, hello. Welcome in, everybody. My name is Nick. I am the host of the Part-Time Pilot podcast and founder of PartTimePilot.com. Thank you for joining me. We have a special episode today. So if you've been following along through the podcast, so for over 93 or I think this is the 94th episode, we've gone through every single lesson of our online ground school. And then we just did a series on check ride prep stuff. So we went through a little bit of our check ride prep course. You know, a lot of that stuff is reviewing the stuff you learned in ground, making sure you're ready, going through the maneuvers that you have to do. Now, I didn't cover most of that because that's going to be covered with your examiner. And we might do a couple more episodes on the practical part of that coming up. I haven't quite decided, but we've covered most of the episodes that I've done. You know, covered top 10 tips for the oral, top 10 tips for the practical check ride. We did a mock check ride, what to expect episodes. We even talked about some example oral exam type questions and how to get through the oral exam, what documents you're going to have to show, and all that good stuff, how to prepare for that. So now that we've kind of gotten through that, I want to take a little bit of a break. We have our scholarship, our spring scholarship coming up. So we're going to do an episode on that next week. And so let's just talk about that for 1 second. So we had the application open for a week. It closed last Friday. And then now what we're having the finalists do is create a 3 to 5 minute video. We're going to play the audio of those videos on next week's podcast. And we're also going to release them on our social media, send out links to email, Facebook, all that stuff. And we want you guys to vote on the finalists to determine the one winner of our spring scholarship. Now, we've been fundraising through our GoFundMe. That's kind of the goal of the spring scholarships, make it bigger and better. We start with $1,000 donation from myself. And then this year we got some sponsors, Plain English, Core Aviation, Katana, and Fly Like a Local. Those are our sponsors this year. So shout out to them one more time. They are fantastic. And then we also shared that GoFundMe link and got some donations. But it's still going. We are still fundraising, trying to make it as big as possible until we decide and give all the cash, every single bit of it, except for the little fee that GoFundMe gets, to the winner that you guys vote on. So that link of the GoFundMe is in the show notes. Please share that until the very end. Donate until the very end. Be very, 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 very appreciated. So that's what we're going to do next week. And then today, and then after that, we're going to play a couple episodes with some guest interviews. So we kind of did a mock check ride that was kind of a guest interview. We had a guest on. And then we did this before with an expert on stress. That was Shannon. And then this one today, I interviewed Andi Clark, who is an expert on sleep. So I've talked before about the importance of sleep once or twice. And we know in our I'm Safe checklist, that S of the I'm Safe checklist can mean sleep or stress. Depends on who you ask. I like to use both of it, and they're kind of interchangeable because the less sleep you get, the more stress you're going to be the next day. And your blood pressure is going to go up, and studies have shown your cognitive ability goes down. So test taking results, decision making is slower. The neurons from your brain even go to your muscles slower. They've done studies on athletes where athletes who get more sleep can balance better. So the quick twitches of their muscles, the neurons firing from the brain to their muscles, react faster with better sleep. And then even athletes that don't get enough sleep have more injuries. Crazy effects of sleep. And we're going to get into that with Andi Clark. And the great thing about it is we relate it to pilots, because even as a student pilot, you got a full-time job, you have kids, you're doing ground school, flight training, you got a lot going on. And a lot of times us hard workers, we like to sacrifice sleep. And this just puts a halt on that and shows, one, the importance of it, and two, Andi gives us some tips and tricks on how to make sure we get enough sleep so that we have the best amount of performance during our flight. And you guys know me that I'm always about finding that 0.1%, 0.5%, and I think sleep might be entire percentage that will increase our chances of having a safe flight and surviving any type of emergency, because we're going to have quicker decision making, quicker reflexes, and it's very, very important. And so all the things that we can do to add those little percentages and improve our chances of having a safe flight, I am all for, and I am all for teaching to you guys. So we're going to get in that. And we even talk about, commercial pilots. So those of you that are going to make this a career, when you're flying to different time zones, how do you make sure that, you get enough sleep when you're changing time zones all the time, when, you got to get to sleep, but it's still light outside, all that type of thing. So Andi's got some great tips and tricks on that. She's an expert. She does it for a living, helping people get back control of their sleep. So it's a fantastic episode. And without further ado, let's play that interview with Andi. Hey pilots, this is Nick. Now, if you've been listening to the podcast, you may have heard us talking about Core Aviation headsets and how with the coupon code Part-Time Pilot, you can get 10% off and free shipping. Well, I just wanted to let you know that got better. You can now get 15% off and free shipping. So an extra 5% off on Core Aviation headsets. These are a fantastic beginner headset. Now I say beginner just because they are at a beginner price. When we're starting off with flight training, we want to keep all our funds for flight training because it is so expensive. And this gives us that affordable option to do that. But then it's not exactly a beginner headset because I have still had my Core Aviation headsets that I got way back when I was a student pilot. It's almost 5 years ago. It's still working great and I've had zero problems with it. So with that 15% off now, use coupon code Part-Time Pilot. I'll put a link in the show notes. But with that, you get 50% off, you get free shipping. You can get your very own headset for I think less than $100 still. Or you can get their more advanced headset for less than $200. That is a steal, and it is way better than sharing those sweaty old headsets that have issues and connection issues at your flight school. So go ahead and check out Core Aviation headsets and use code Part-Time Pilot. Hello, welcome in. Today we have a super exciting guest. We're going to do some guest interviews, as I've been telling you guys, on things that are super valuable that I think for student pilots. And this one is valuable for everyone in their life. And I remember hearing some really cool facts about sleep and becoming interested in the power of sleep a while ago, but I just dabbled in it. And today we have an expert on sleep. And her name is Andi. Hi, Andi.
Hey, how are you?
So why don't you introduce yourself, tell us your background, expertise, who you are, where you're from, all that good stuff.
All right. So I am a sleep, stress, and resilience coach. I've been in the health industry, wellness industry for over 30 years with all kinds of different clients and corporate CEOs and athletes. And since 2018, I really focused a lot with first responders. And in that first responder world with all sleep and stress, I did have flight paramedics and I did have flight operators and stuff. So a lot of the questions and things that you and I have been talking about, I'm like, oh yeah, I've had clients like this that we were talking about all these different scenarios. So what we'll be diving into today will be definitely great for them to hear, because sleep definitely can affect, recovery will affect the performance, not only while you're in flight, but also how you're handling your family life and the rest of your life out there. So this has been my whole life in the health and wellness field and working in this. And you said about location as well. So I'm in Toronto, Canada. So we just had a snowstorm here the other day. Crazy. It's almost the end of the March. So
yeah, wild. I've heard Toronto's really cool, but I've never been.
It's one of the most multicultural cities in the world, which is fascinating with everything that you can get here and all that happens in all of the cultures. It's just such a great city to be in.
Yeah, I need to check it out. I've been meaning to for a while. So it's really cool that you said, when I first talked to you over Messenger, I really like the first responders, because I think it's one, I get a lot of first responders who are interested in becoming a pilot. And I don't know why that is. I don't know if it's, they're already predisposed to a risky type of lifestyle or something, or that adrenaline rush type of thing probably is what it is. But it makes sense. And I think there's a lot of correlation. You mentioned first responder, first aid pilots or whatever you call them. But there's high stress situations for a short amount of time. And then the preparation that goes into all that is very similar to pilots, I think. So I'm excited. I thought that connection was easily made to pilots. I mentioned before that I heard on a podcast, it was this PhD scientist talking about the power of sleep. And it just blew my mind. He did all these studies on athletes, getting injured more if they get less hours of sleep, and all these things really blew my mind. So what are some benefits of getting a good night's sleep versus not getting a good night's sleep, both mental and physical?
Yeah, so we can go from just the average day-to-day things all the way to the extreme that can affect pilots. So with just the normal day-to-day, just your ability to handle little stressors. So small things that happen. If you have kids, just them being able to handle small things with your family, just relationships, like being able to be calm with your spouse. There was a study done once where they had a couple just one night got less sleep. So they had them go on a date when they were fully recovered and sleep. And then they had one of them become sleep deprived. And I think it was for one night or 3 nights where they had 6 hours of sleep. Definition of sleep deprivation is 6 hours of sleep or less. Chronic sleep deprivation is 3 months of 6 hours of sleep or less.
Oh, wow.
6 hours of sleep or less, the cognitive decline already happens. Your ability to stay calmer, your ability to make good decisions making, and all of that just from one night. So they had these couples go on a date, and it was fascinating how after that date with the one that was sleep deprived, how both of them had struggles in that date, and both of them rated the date like really low. So it just shows that 2 to 3 days of sleeping off can really affect somebody. And if we think of it as far as pilots go, you're in different time zones. A lot of things are shifting. The hours aren't the regular hours that most people sleep. And definitely going to be times that you're getting less than those 6 hours.
Absolutely.
Understanding, and that's the same similarities with the first responders, is understanding, okay, this is going to happen in your job. This is going to happen in your career. How can I be as strong as possible going into that? How can I have the least sleep deprivation going into it? And how can I improve my sleep as soon as I've finished a flight? If I've had a night with enough sleep, what can I do to recover as quickly after? So where this goes into as well is to the extreme, as we were saying. I mean, you were talking about not recovering from injuries and all of the stress symptoms that start coming in, gut issues, anger, mood swings, all of that. But then it starts getting into ethical mistakes. You start having struggles with problem solving. So anything goes awry up in flight, you will struggle with the decisions to make in quick split decisions, and suicide rates go up.
Wow.
Yeah.
I heard also cardiac arrest goes up. Is that true?
Yeah. Part of your stress system as well. Like your stress system is managing 50 different hormone responses, and cholesterol, blood pressure, all of those are involved as well. And if you're not getting a really good night's sleep, then that also increases your ability to handle stressors the next day.
Wow. See, I thought that's interesting. You said 50 different wow. So because I always thought like getting less sleep means you have elevated blood pressure and blood struggles getting to where it needs to be on time or something like that. And that was kind of like the explanation for it. But you said sounds like it's a lot more effect as well.
There's a lot to it. And you get blood sugars as well, because anytime your stress system's kicking in, your blood sugar is regulating. But if you're shifting time zones, if you have a late flight that you're getting home at 12, 1 o'clock, that's going to shift how your hormones are all healing and repairing while you're sleeping.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think for our student pilots, I know this was me when I was a student pilot. It was trying to just fly on the weekends when you don't have work is tough to just fly like that once a week, especially when all the plane, like if you're in a busy city, like I was in San Diego, like everyone wants the planes on the weekends. And so it's hard to book a plane to fly. So you want to fly during the week once. And if you're doing ground school too, like maybe student pilots are, they're waking up early from work, getting an hour of studying. And then after work, they're driving and then doing a flight lesson, or maybe in the middle of the day, and then they're working later. So their days are expanded. And then they get home and then they got to cook dinner, or maybe they have kids. And so their days are expanded. And then I know for me that the sleep is usually what gets compressed to make room for that expanded day, right?
Yeah. The thing is that life's not always perfect. And we can say, you need this amount of sleep, you need to go to bed at this time, and you need to do these things. And if you can stick to those as best as possible, as often as you can, then, when other things do happen, if you're going like, as you're studying for pilot school, you have to pay for it. So you have whatever is bringing in your income, you have all these things that are pushing you that you're not going to be able to be perfect. And we're all going to go through these cycles in life where, okay, I'm really being taxed right now. So it's having those tools to understand how to stay as strong as possible during that, and how to recover as quickly after that if you're already in it. If you're not in it, but you know that you're going to be going to flight school, then doing everything that you can before you get in it to be as strong as possible so that you can maintain while you're taxing yourself.
Yeah, and that kind of leads to my next question. You mentioned, a lot of people listening, they want to make flying a career, so they'll be in the airlines and they'll be always changing time zones, right? So, and you talked about that, and you kind of alluded to, let's say I'm a pilot, I have a trip to the East Coast and it's a late flight already. Let's say I'm flying from 5 p.m. LA time and I'm getting to, New York around 10 p.m. LA time, but that would be like 1 a.m. New York time or something like that. I don't know if that's a real route or time, but whatever. And then they got stuff to do the next day. They're in a hotel room, so it's not their own bed. Let's say they get 5 hours of sleep, right? And then what can they do in that situation? Let's say their flight's the next day after that or that night, because there's rules on how much time you got to have off and all that stuff. So let's say they have a flight that night. What can they do during that day, the next day, if they got 5 hours of sleep? Is there anything?
Yeah. So if it's just a one-off, then I would try to stay on LA time if possible, as much as possible. Yes, it would be 10 p.m. LA time. I would try to wake up. So there's things in a hotel room. So when you would get to your hotel room, if you bring clothes pegs and really try to close the curtains as much as possible, or bring a sleep mask so that it's really dark, it'll be lighter earlier in New York than it will be in LA. So you would want it to be really dark in that hotel room. Make sure that you can try to sleep as late as possible as you can in order to try to stay more on LA time.
Yeah, because 5 a.m. New York time, when the first twilight in the morning would be like 5 a.m. New York time, it would be 2 a.m. LA time. So if you're trying to stay on LA time, you just want to keep it dark, you're saying.
Right. So if you're getting up at 7 a.m. LA time, then that would be 10 a.m. in New York time, which you don't check out of your hotel then. If you end up waking up earlier, try not to get sun in your eyes until LA time that you want to wake up. So this is a big key to adjusting to any time zones. So if you're going into a different time zone and you need to get into that time zone, wake up in the morning time of that time zone, and you get sun in your eyes for a minimum of 10 minutes. And that sun in your eyes is going to start resetting your circadian rhythms. So it knows in about 12, 15 hours that's when your sleep hormones should start kicking in. So that's how you adjust.
So that's like if you were to have like a week on the East Coast worth of sleep, you'd want to I guess how many days until you recommend changing to the East Coast time schedule?
So with flights, it would depend and I'm just guessing based on little things I've heard with flights, is sometimes like you're on the same flight. Some people are always traveling to maybe just kind of, they have one like kind of route that they do continually, whereas some people are all over the map, like going like east or west or wherever. So if you're all over the map, and this is where it is so individual. So this is a really tough question. So I'm going to try to answer it as best as possible, but I definitely won't cover all scenarios. So if it's just once a week or twice a week, I would definitely try as best as possible to stay in your home time zone.
Okay.
You are traveling, like if your block is larger in another time zone, then I would start to try to shift. Like 3 to 4 days beforehand, start shifting everything about an hour if possible. The thing is that as I'm saying this, I'm like, not everybody's lifestyles are different, and what's happening in your life doesn't always make all these things possible. Yeah, so this is hard. Like, unless it's something that you're continually doing all the time, if it's possible to stay in your time zones,
that's best.
That is best. But if you can't and you need to shift, then the things that I would do would be sun in your eyes first thing in the morning for 10 minutes. Even if you're beyond exhausted and you need to go and take a nap again after, go for it, because that sun in your eyes will still reset it.
Okay, so you're saying like sort of sacrifice that first night of sleep to get into rhythm. It's kind of what you're saying, right?
New time zone, yes. Wake up at your morning wake up time in that new time zone, 10 minutes of sun in your eyes, and have a nap. Have a really long nap in the afternoon if you need, and then go to bed in the evening at your normal time if possible. If you're flying that next day, you really do need to take into account, though, your sleep and your ability to sleep. So that would be like huge nap, like having a really big nap. But if you're flying again that night, I'm assuming you're not staying in that time zone.
Yeah, right.
In that situation, most likely have stayed in your original time zone.
Gotcha. I imagine for most pilot routes, your recommendation of just staying in your kind of home time zone is probably the best one to go for most pilot routes, unless they're like staying in one time zone for a week or something. Okay, cool. So I bet there's people out there that are like, okay, sounds easy enough, but my problem is getting to sleep, like getting myself to sleep. Especially like student pilots, like I mentioned the one earlier, they got a full-time job, they're doing ground training, they're trying to get flight lessons in. They have the stress of their wallets being sucked dry, and maybe they have kids or family they're taking care of. So they have a lot on their mind. And then even just, an airline pilot who, maybe something happened on the flight that was kind of stressful or traumatic, or they got other things going on and they're going to different time zones. Like you said, the light is different and all that. Are there tricks to calming your mind, or like you said, have a nap? I am so horrible at naps. I can't, I just have too much on my mind during the day. So I've never been able to take naps. So are there any tricks you can do to help people fall asleep?
Yeah. So different situations. So the one you're saying where you're ruminating a lot over maybe something that did happen in flight, that what I would actually start with is to just do like a brain dump and write everything down on paper, because once you get it, sometimes the thoughts keep going because you don't want to forget them. You don't want to forget points or forget things that happen if you're doing like a debrief, or, you want to make sure you're preventing something in the future. And so that is where I would say, first off, just dump it all on paper. Even if you burn it, rip it up, put it in the toilet. You don't want anybody to see what's on there. Like, that's totally fine. Just get it all out on paper first. And then the two things that you would do after, well, you can within an hour of going to sleep is taking magnesium. So magnesium biglycinate, it's a BIS, bisglycinate, biglycinate, or a magnesium threonate. Do not take a citrate. Magnesium citrate loosens your bowels. It's a different form of magnesium. But what happens is when your body is sensing that there's so much going on, you have a lot of stress going on, or it doesn't necessarily know the time zones, or that it's time to go to bed, which could be because it's seeing a lot of blue lights. So blue lights themselves can decrease that sense of needing to fall asleep for 1 to 2 hours.
And that's like the lights from our phones and computers, right?
Yes. Yeah. So on your phone, you can put it on night mode where it switches to all black screens.
And I have some of these blue light blockers. Yeah.
So what you have there are the clear lens. So those clear lens are daytime blue light blocking glasses. The ones with the clear lens. And so mine are a clear lens too. Mine have a blue light blocking coating on them. With those block about 80% of blue lights, but you would want one with an orange lens for nights. So that is something that a pilot would be very good to, like if you're in a time zone where you need to go to bed while the sun's still kind of up, is putting on a pair of blue light blocking glasses while you're like in your hotel room or at your house if you need to really be going to bed early. Dim all of the lights in your house, close the curtains where sunlight would be coming in. If you need to, so I'm thinking of like, if you need to be up at 4 a.m., so you need to go to bed at like 8 p.m., right? Close all the curtains in the house and dim the lights. We actually, on our bedside tables in our house too, have light bulbs that are red. So there's no blue light blocking. So we can still like read and do things in our room at night, but there's no blue lights. So what I didn't say in my intro is my husband's a first responder, all shifts. So we have blocking curtains on like even our living room and dining room. So if he needs to go to bed at 6, 7 o'clock at night, some nights in order to be up at 2, 3 in the morning, he will like turn off all the lights and make sure our lights are dimmed so that his sleep hormones can start kicking.
Oh yeah. And you could use the red light still if you wanted to read or something.
Yeah. We do try to limit screens, but at the same time, like just put the night mode on and have the orange glasses. Super helpful for if you're in a time zone where it's still light. That's also a good thing if you're waking up in a time zone that's still light, but you don't want to be adjusting to that time zone at that moment. Then making sure that you have like orange blue light blocking glasses on in the morning and then take those off once you want to be on the time zone you want to be on.
Okay, so kind of think of like the blue light as sunlight and the circadian rhythm you want to be on.
Yes.
Okay, yeah. Interesting. Because pilots know about the red light because we use like red light flashlights when we fly at night to avoid like night blindness from white lights. So yeah, that totally makes sense. And then yeah, on the iPhone, I think if you triple click this, it turns the screen red. Do you use that? Do you have an iPhone?
Mine just goes into, I actually have mine on night mode all the time, 24/7, just because we get so much blue light in us all the time, just from everything in our environment, that I just try to decrease I'm just so used to the night mode on it that it doesn't even faze me anymore. Even my laptop has night mode on almost every app.
Yeah, that's smart.
So the other thing that's huge that we were talking about with the magnesium.
Do you know if that, I just want to throw out the disclaimer that, before you take anything, check with your aviation medical examiner, make sure. Do you know if it's on I'm pretty sure magnesium should be fine, but I don't know.
I can't imagine it being, because magnesium is just a vitamin that we have all of the time in our body. It really is a mineral that I can't imagine it. And this is a main thing for first responders as well, right? Like they need to be alert. They need to be ready for a call when a call comes in. So it can't be anything that is going to cognitively change them. The thing with magnesium as well is you can actually take it in the morning before your day starts. So it's not like, and I'll explain why we say before night when you're struggling to fall asleep, because it'll help you understand how it works without it being, it's not like a sleep sedative, it's a sleep aid. So it's a very different thing. So magnesium is as I said, biglycinate or threonate. What it does is when your stress system is kicked in, when you think that it's daytime, when you think that it's still time to be awake, you get cortisol, which is your energy hormone floating around in the frontal lobe of your brain. And that stress energy hormone, when it's floating around in the frontal lobe of your brain, your natural melatonin, your sleep hormones can't kick in. So quite often people will say, oh, melatonin, but there's actually magnesium is that precursor, because what magnesium does is it sends a signal to that cortisol in the frontal lobe of your brain that it is time to start calming down a little bit. So it's good for people that have anxiety, but it's also good for people that would like to decrease that cortisol so that your melatonin naturally knows to then kick in. The thing with magnesium as well is anytime your stress system kicks in, magnesium is also released in your body. So when you're on a flight, you constantly have to be on alert. You have to be aware of your surroundings. You're constantly, checking dials and checking like the horizon. And with that, your body is most likely emitting a lot of magnesium that we find restless leg syndrome. I know in first responders was really prevalent, that I'm wondering in pilots if it is prevalent too. Quite often that's a magnesium deficiency. But there is no way that we can really eat enough magnesium on a daily basis for what our body needs, especially if we're in a higher stressed job, a higher stressed position.
Cool. So I just looked it up on our website, parttimepilot.com. I made an AI that I trained on the aviation medical PDFs and stuff. So I just asked it, can pilots take magnesium? And it says, yes, but you need to consult, just like we said, with your aviation medical examiner and see. It sounds like the dosage, stuff like that, they'll want to go over and make sure it doesn't interact with anything else. But it says the magnesium is required as part of a medical examination process for pilots in the basic metabolic panel, which includes a measurement of magnesium, is required. So as long as your magnesium isn't out of whack in the general range, and that's kind of what you were talking about.
If you actually want to dive deeper in that too, there's something called a hair mineral analysis test. So with all of your minerals too, there needs to be proper ratios of certain minerals. And just sodium potassium is an easy one to give an example of this. So sodium and potassium, when you have the right ratios of them, that's your muscle contraction. You need sodium and potassium for your muscles to contract and relax. So if there's an imbalance of those, you might get cramping. And so there's other chemical reactions that happen in your body, in your stress system, where we need to make sure that the ratios of vitamins and minerals are on par with one another. And calcium and magnesium is one of them. I'd have to look at my charts to see with the hair mineral analysis test, what are the other ratios that do include magnesium? It could be copper and magnesium, I'm not sure, but it makes sure that you're in the right dosages as well as in the right ratios with other minerals as well. And that would fall in line as to what the testing that you're saying requires as well. That hair mineral analysis test is amazing because it helps you with heavy metal toxins and with all vitamins and minerals that your stress system requires to stay strong. So you'll be able to see, and it is amazing when we were doing these, like when we do these tests with responders, or I do them with any of my other clients, and we're looking at them and you can see if certain heavy metals are high, they're linked to anxiety, they're linked to gut issues, they're linked to like memory struggles, concentration, and same thing with these vitamins and minerals. When the ratios are really off, there's certain things that you're not, like your stress system isn't as strong. And as soon as you're given the proper vitamins and minerals, like sometimes it's just a multi, but we had a practitioner that was in my first responder program that was so diligent that she would give different multivitamins to different people based on their hair mineral analysis results. So that if one of them needed a little more copper or a little more magnesium or a little less of this, she would like give them a different multi to give them what they needed so that their stress system was as strong as it needed to be.
Interesting. So what's it called? The hair minimal?
Hair mineral
Hair,
analysis.
like our hair?
Here. So what it
Okay.
is, actually take like little pieces of your hair to give about a teaspoon of hair, but it's like pieces from all over. My husband is follically challenged, so he usually shaves his head. So he would just kind of grow out his hair for a week or two, and then I would just put his head over a table with a paper under it, and I would just kind of clip little pieces of as much of his hair as I could until I can get like a teaspoon. But you get like the last hair is like the last inch. And what it gives you is the last 3 months of data of what is actually happening in your body. So blood test is giving you what's in your body right now. Hair mineral analysis test gives you over time.
And where could you get, like, can you get this done at like your primary doctor's office?
Functional practitioner. In my practice, I've had holistic practitioners, I've had functional nutritionists and functional doctor that have all worked with me and a naturopath, and they have all done hair mineral analysis tests.
Very cool. So yeah, I just thinking like if pilots really struggling with sleep, talking to aviation medical examiner, seeing what those acceptable ranges of minerals and heavy metals that they look for in their examination, make sure you know those ranges. And then, maybe look to get one of these hair mineral tests and see maybe you're outside of those ranges and you can use some natural supplements to get in there. But consult your aviation medical examiner before you do anything.
Absolutely.
Yeah, cool. That's awesome. I'm very interested in wondering what my hair mineral would be. Cool. Let's see here. What else did I want to talk about? Oh, yeah. What are some things that really affect our sleep that maybe we don't pay too much attention about? I think you mentioned hydration. I've heard exercise. What are some like daily, everyday tasks that can help us with our sleep cycle?
Yeah, breathing and hydration. Well, if you're talking sleep cycle, as we touched on too, making sure your circadian rhythms are checked with getting that sun in your eyes in the morning, that just definitely gets overlooked all the time. In our house, my kids know every morning they have their breakfast, they go for a walk around the block. They go and look for cats. It's hilarious. But they don't realize I'm doing that for them to make sure that they get sun in their eyes that regulates their sleep at night.
Wow, yeah, that's so smart.
So overlooked. Blue screens at night is a big one as well. That does definitely gets overlooked. Now we can't get rid of them completely, but as I said, there are some things that you can do. So those are two big ones. But if we're looking at like hydration as well, so the two things, so my program with first responders, the first two things first two modules ever is working on breathing and hydration. And it is fascinating how many of them after doing that are like, oh my God, I feel so much better. My sleep's starting to improve. I've got more energy. I'm not as short. But we are so dehydrated. And the thing though, as with pilots, as with first responders, is getting to a restroom when you've got your full uniform on or going to the restroom while you're in flight, you can't do. So how do you make sure that you're getting hydrated enough in your day around your flight?
Yeah.
So the tricks are, as soon as you wake up, have I always have a mason jar beside me, but if you get like a water bottle, wherever you're going to be first thing in the morning, make sure that you have a water bottle, make 50 ounces would be amazing if you could get there and chug it first thing in the morning.
50 ounces. That's like
a lot.
That's a lot.
Yeah. But the thing is
that way it gives you time to process and then you can go pee and then before you get on your flight.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have to start thinking about this not as throughout your entire day, but how can we make it so that you can go into your flight hydrated?
Right. You're kind of like front loading your hydration.
Mm-hmm. So first thing in the morning, and then if you can try depending on when you're if you're actually waking up and going right to your flight, but if you're not waking up, chug as much as you can, like an hour later or so, chug as much as you can, so that about an hour and a half before your flight, you're not chugging anymore. So you can just go and relieve all of it. And then as soon as your flight is over, chug again.
Okay. Yeah, I
Mhm.
like that.
And then electrolytes. That's a huge one too, because if you don't have enough electrolytes in your water, you're not going to be able to absorb it as well. So you're just pretty much going to pee it out. I will also say that anybody that's starting to hydrate themselves, you're just going to pee at the start because your cells aren't used to absorbing it.
Throw
Your
in
body-
a Pedialyte in there or something.
Yeah. So I'm really picky on what products that I suggest and use all the time. So Nun, Nuun is one. And I know in the States, you can get Nun at,
I've seen that before.
you can get them all over in the States. Canada, there's only a couple places we can get them. But
Mm.
Nun has very clean ingredients. Those are about the only two at the moment. There is another one, can't remember one, but it's really high sodium one. And there are more studies coming out about sodium, which that being said, in our house, we actually don't use a lot of the electrolyte powders and stuff. I'll use them if I really need to. But what we do is we take Himalayan salt, the rock crystals, take those crystals, and those crystals, there are 23 vitamins and minerals that your stress system requires from Himalayan salt. Let it dissolve in like your water bottle. You can't taste it. You should not taste it. If you drink it, it will start feeding your stress system. So that was one thing. That was a game changer. So you'll find
Great.
as well that a lot of electrolytes have the sodium in it as well. It's a huge help.
That's so interesting.
So in the summer versus the winter, we tend to have more salt because if you're really sweating it out, then you're sweating out your electrolytes more. So my husband, when he's not as much out in the public as much anymore, so in the heat, when he still actually always has a little container of Himalayan salts in his bag, always with him. So if you have a flight bag with you, that should just be always something that you have is just some salts to always add them in your water bottle or
Could you just like put a dab on your tongue of it and then drink the water? Or you definitely would taste it then, but
if that's your flavor, I'd say go for it. But
just take like just one swig, get it over with, and then the rest. But I guess if you don't taste it,
can't taste it. You should not be able to taste it at all.
that's
So
awesome. Yeah, the one question I had is maybe you mentioned this and I missed it, but drinking a bunch of water in the morning, let's say your flight is in the morning, how much time should you give yourself? Because I know sometimes I'll have to go to the bathroom multiple times if I drink a bunch in the morning. Is there like a time that it takes to process it all for most people or okay.
honestly, that you guys know your body best. I would err on the side of caution when you're starting to do this and test it out. Honestly, because
Yeah. Here I
like,
am drinking a diuretic as we speak. Coffee.
yeah, you will find you'll need less coffee if you're hydrated.
Wow, really?
Yeah, because one of the signs of dehydration is fatigue.
I feel like I do okay. I definitely need to drink more water, but I do okay. I mostly work from home or travel around. But my wife, she's dealing with patients all the time, all day, and she really struggles finding time to drink water. If someone has a job like that, or like maybe they can't take a big bottle of water with them or something, are there any tricks?
How much can she have before she's going to work? Like before she gets into work, how much can she chug? Can she like literally on her bedside table? Or this might sound gross to some people, but put the water bottle in the bathroom that you wake up, you go to the bathroom and then you wash your hands. And as you're leaving, you take that water bottle and chug it as you're going to whatever.
Yeah.
Wherever you're going to be first off, have that bottle ready so that you can start front loading.
So yeah, front load. We need to drink our water in the morning. That's smart.
And backload too, like not too close to going to bed, but as soon as your shift is over, like if you can, depends on how long your commute is. If your commute isn't that long, if you could chug before you like even hop into your car and then drive home, then you can go to the bathroom as soon as you get home, but you've already setting yourself up, or as soon as your flight lands, chug a bottle of water before you even get off the plane.
Yeah, yeah. Cool. So what about breathing?
So breathing is fascinating because breathing, you have your stress system and your resting system, your nervous systems. And when you're in your stressed nervous system, you're actually breathing through your mouth. When you're in your resting nervous system, you're breathing through your nose. The first thing is to always pay attention if you're breathing through your mouth or your nose, because that'll already be an indicator. Are you snoring at night? Are you waking up with like dry mouth, feeling really gross in your mouth because you've been breathing through your mouth? or you're being elbowed from somebody because you are snoring, that is telling you that you're switched into your stress nerve and you're breathing through your mouth and not your nose. And that switches the quality of your sleep because you can't get into your really good quality deep and REM sleep when you're in a stressed state, because your stress state is actually keeping you more alert.
I've heard of people taping their mouth shut when they go to sleep.
Yeah. Is only this past week I've heard my first study on how that is not as effective as people have said that it is. I've taped my mouth too. I've taken courses all on breathing and stuff where it's been about mouth taping. And they've said that with certain people with certain health conditions or sleep apnea, of certain types of sleep apnea, that it has not been beneficial for them. I'd be very curious with those studies as well, if anything else had been done to help those people, though, with their breathing, other than just, hey, let's tape their mouth, even though they have these health conditions.
Yeah.
So I don't know on it. I think mouth taping is great. My husband, you can always tell when he's starting to get stressed at work because he does start snoring, and he will mouth tape. And for a night or two of mouth taping, and then he's good again. His body has switched back to nose breathing, and it's helped his stress in the day.
And obviously, if you like have some phlegm or you're clogged up, that makes that difficult, right?
When you start switching to your stress state and you start mouth breathing more, that's when phlegm does kick up. If you are breathing through your nose all of the time, it actually starts clearing your airways. There's studies with like people with asthma, people with like breathing struggles, that once they really start focusing and training themselves to breathe through their nose. If anybody wants to dive into this rabbit hole, just Google carbon dioxide tolerance and start doing carbon dioxide tolerance breathing. And that starts training your system through your nose. That starts training your system to start really breathing through your nose, to start training your system to be in its resting state more. It builds up your tolerance to carbon dioxide, so you can actually hold your breath for longer and stay in a restful state.
That's what breathing through your nose, that's why it's better, what you're alluding to, the carbon dioxide.
The carbon dioxide tolerance testing depending on who you're doing it with, will tell you to exhale through your mouth. Whereas some people will have you doing both through nose, inhale and exhale through your nose. The carbon dioxide is starting to really start training your breathing system. So if somebody wants to go into that rabbit hole, if they're really snoring, if they did no carbon dioxide tolerance through the nose, it would be a way to start helping that, to be training them. But just as soon as we change to our nose. So if you're struggling to fall asleep, when you breathe through your nose, and
it's the nervous system switch that you were talking about.
You're just kind of flipping that switch back to your resting nervous system. The best way to do it is if we focus on shapes. So a circle or a square or a triangle will calm you down. So if you inhale, pause, exhale, pause, kind of a square, kind of a rectangle. Just
I see.
Pause, exhale, pause. You do squares, that will downregulate you, help you sleep. If you do triangles as well, inhale, exhale, pause.
Yeah, isn't there a military method, like a square method of breathing? It's like,
yeah, and in different therapies, different trauma therapies, they talk about box breathing as well. When you're getting into carbon dioxide tolerance breathing, as I had just mentioned, you do circles where there's no pausing. It's just inhale, exhale, exhale. And then you do some triangles or some squares after, and with long pauses in there. And that starts really building up your ability to handle stressors, to be able to manage stressors easier.
Yeah, the box breathing is like 2 minutes. Do you know the details? It's like
inhale 2, pause for 2. Some do it 4x4.
Yeah, the 4x4.
What I find with that, though, is at the same time is you may not have time to be counting that, but also those counts might stress you out.
Yeah, they totally do.
Right. There's different ways to get the breathing to be able to hold the pauses better without stressing you out. When you're stressing out from the pausing, that's your body's telling you that it can't hold carbon dioxide in anymore.
So just to make it, so just focus on the shapes, and then that will personalize it for you in your comfort level kind of thing.
Inhale what's comfortable for you to inhale, pause what's comfortable to pause, exhale what's comfortable, and pause what's comfortable, versus doing a count, because the counts can sometimes completely stress someone out.
Yeah, no, I've felt that before when I've tried that stuff. So
that's a good start. You can get into advanced where you do start working on numbers and you work into that, but I would never start anybody with that at the start.
Very cool. These are awesome tips. Thank you. Okay, so we talked about hydration, we talked about breathing, and those are the two you wanted to mention, right?
Yeah. So if you're struggling to keep, if you've had the magnesium and you're laying in your pillow and you're struggling to be able to fall asleep, focus on the breathing. And that would be square or a triangle at a pace that works for you.
You mentioned to me about tracking your sleep.
Oh, yeah. So this is something that for new pilots would be amazing to be able to do before you actually get into this as a career. So tracking, there's trackers such as the Whoop band, WHOOP.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
There's Aura Ring. So I've got both. So I wear the Aura Ring. It's a titanium ring. I don't know if you can see.
I've seen that. There's a Apple Watch Aura band that I actually got and it didn't work. So I sent it back and I meant to look into it, but I was kind of turned off. I got it in the mail and it was like scratched up. It was like they had just like someone else returned it and they just shipped it off to me or something. So, but you have the Aura ring. So does that?
And the Whoop band. So this is a Whoop. So it's not a watch. There's no face on it at all. It's just a tracker. So the tracker is actually like in here. Like you can see the tracker.
Oh, yeah.
Tracker.
And does the battery last pretty long?
So the Whoop, yeah, it's coupled, but the Whoop, one reason I love the Whoop is it's got a battery pack that just slips right on like this. Just slide it right.
Oh, yeah. Because that's the problem with my Apple Watch is I always have to charge it at night.
Yeah. And that's with my ring. I always have to take it off to charge it. Right.
Yeah.
The Whoop, you don't. You just have this extra battery pack. You just keep it in your flight bag. Your mid-flight, it tells you that your battery is running low. You just pop it on. Doesn't matter where you are all the time. So the Whoop as well. So what these track, and I actually do prefer the Whoop. The Whoop has an amazing podcast. So anybody that wants to really dive into this, I would suggest the Whoop podcast. So the Whoop and the Aura Ring, their main trackers, the main things that I would look into are sleep and HRV.
HRV?
Heart rate variability.
Okay.
So sleep, it's going to tell you the latency, how long it took you to fall asleep. That should be 5 to 15, 20 minutes. Should never be less, should never be more. Those are signs of sleep deprivation. And then it'll show you how long you were in deep sleep, how long you were in REM sleep.
So if you fall asleep in less than 5 minutes, it's a sign of sleep deprivation?
Your body's really tired. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, then you have deep and REM. And this is really what's fascinating too about what we were saying before about less than 8 hours of sleep. Deep sleep is your first 2/3 of your sleep. REM is the last 2/3 of your sleep. So if you're cutting your sleep short, you're cutting your REM sleep. REM is your brain, memory processing, creativity, taking things in. So when you're studying and learning all of this new information that you need to take in, you miss on your hours of sleep. You can't process, like put all of that into your brain.
Because you don't get into REM?
Because you're not getting enough REM to put it all in. Yeah.
And you said, so the first 2/3 is deep and then the last third is REM?
The last 2/3 is REM. So they overlap in the middle.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Middle third gets an overlap. What you'll see on a tracker when somebody's sleep deprived is deep will take over. And they will just get tons and tons of deep until their deep is paid off. And then they start getting more REM and they get into that 2/3 and 2/3.
Oh, interesting. So it has like a memory.
Yeah. So that's where too, you start seeing that ethical mistakes, trouble problem solving from 6 hours or less of sleep. It's because you're missing 2 hours of REM.
Yeah, when I was in college, and like studying for tests, like it took me a while. I wish I knew this better, but it took me a while to realize that I'm better off going to bed and getting a good night's sleep before my test than staying up all night studying like last minute stuff.
Yeah. And the fascinating thing is once you see the numbers. So like with pilot, you have all these dials, you have all these checklists, you have all these things that you need to make sure that the plane is functioning, but we don't have like a checklist for your body. We don't have this checklist of, are you good? Are you okay? And so having that sleep and really seeing once you start learning what gets you the best deep and what gets you the best REM, which is different for each individual. Like what may help one person is not necessarily what's going to help somebody else. So having that data, what works for you. When I'm changing time zones, it's this amount of magnesium that I need. I need to really make sure like you start actually seeing that the sun really does help.
Yeah.
You'll start seeing those things, or you'll see if you start using blue light blocking glasses and dimming the lights, you'll see, oh, that really did make a difference in my deep sleep and getting into that sleep. So you'll start seeing those things. Now, the other marker, now there's a lot of other markers on the Whoop that are fascinating. The two that I would focus on at the start, because it's a beast, but the two that I'd focus on the start would be HRV and sleep. So HRV, heart rate variability. That is your body's ability to bounce back from stress.
Okay.
So the higher your heart rate variability is, the more able you are to bounce back from stress.
Okay. So like you have like a high heart rate moment and then you're able to bring that back down and level
So
off.
heart rate variability is the variation of time in between your heartbeats. So it's not the time that, like, how many times your heart beats, it's the time in between beats. You're relaxed when you're stressed, you're breathing less, your heart's beating less, there's more time in between beats. And the more time you have in between beats, so it's different than heart rate. Like heart rate is the number of times your heart beats.
Right.
But the heart rate variability is that variation in between beats. And so when you're sleeping at night, there should be a larger time in between all of those beats. But if your body is not able to manage stress, if you are snoring, if you're sleeping in your stress system, then your HRV is going to be shorter. If burnout is kicking in, if there's certain gut issues that are messing you up, if there's toxins that are messing you up, then your HRV will be lower. Now, that being said, when you do switch time zones, it is going to tank. The key is, and this is why I think having this Whoop would be amazing, is if you're going into a flight with your sleep stats like at their highest and your HRV at its highest before your flights, whatever happens after is most likely going to dip because of all the time variances, because of the stress, can't hydrate yourself. It's going to tank. But how long does it take you to get back up to your peak?
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That could be very powerful. I could almost see like airlines or something like the FAA requiring that as like a safety measure.
There's one podcast episode, if you Google it, it's with the Alaskan Air Force, I want to say, on the Whoop podcast. And they actually did a whole trial with some, was it Air Force or Army? I think it was the Army, with some guys. And they found that the guy who had the highest HRV was the one that they picked to do the check before they all went to do their daily thing. Like, who do you want doing the check of the flight? The guy with the low HRV or the guy with the high HRV?
Yeah. Wow. He seemed the most ready and attuned.
Right?
Yeah.
So it actually became a competition with these guys to see who could get the highest HRV. And that's the person that got to do the checklist that morning to make sure that they had their gear, everything
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
ready and everything was good to go. So it's been fascinating. They're starting to do it, but like there's still rules and regs of people's privacy and all of that. But this is where, as well, working with responders, is you can start seeing when traumas are affecting them.
Yeah.
Ahead of time, before the suicides, before the ethical mistakes, before they're struggling with problem solving, before they're struggling to keep their cool and the anger starts hitting, you can start seeing it in their stats. You can see that their HRV is not recovering after shift. So you know when your HRV isn't recovering after shift, you know that, okay, maybe I need a hair mineral analysis test. I need some supplements. Maybe I need to deal with some traumas that have happened. Maybe I need to get my finances. I need somebody to help me with my finances, right? Maybe I need a break or I need to ask for help from something. Actually, very interesting. So there's a firefighter that we were working with his HRV. So how theirs works is 24 on, 24 off for 3 shifts. And then he has like 3 days off. His HRV got worse after his first day off.
Oh, wow.
And I started asking questions. We had a little daughter and he felt so guilty that his wife was on for 24 hours while he was on, that he in his mind was like, I can't take a nap. I can't rest. I have to help around the house. I have to get this whole to-do list done. I have to do everything with my daughter. So even when his daughter was napping,
He's probably working harder at home.
in a sense, right?
Yeah.
But there's that guilt. There's that family guilt. So when you're doing these hauls and you know, okay, I wasn't there to pick up the kids or I'm not there to take them in the morning and it's all on somebody else. As soon as you get home from your flights, it's like, okay, I can't recover.
Yeah.
And that's, we would sit and talk about strategies of like, okay, how can we do this? Because I'm the spouse of an officer, so I'm not going to suggest everything that's just all about them and doesn't take care of the spouse as well. But it's how can we as a family unit make sure that you get your recovery, but your wife also isn't being neglected or your spouse isn't being neglected? How can we do that? Because it was important. So he ended up getting somebody to care for his child for like 2 hours in the morning so he could come home and just crash for 2 hours. And then he would get his daughter and they would do some stuff, do some errands and things together and hang out with her. And then when she napped, he napped. And then he go to bed at his regular time at night and his HRV increased.
Wow, that's so cool.
Yeah, having a whoop or an aura is like it is. It's honestly like having that pre-flight checklist for your
Yeah.
body.
Yeah, and I've always mentioned this on the podcast, aviation, especially general aviation, small Cessna pilots, like every day you can find somewhere in the US where there was an accident in these planes, right? And so I've always been of the mindset that if I'm going to do this, I'm going to find every small redundancy or an advantage that I can teach myself or do for a flight to just give me that tiny 0.01% edge, And so pilots, we do have something called an I'm safe checklist. There's no like not the FAA making sure that we do this before a flight, but it's a mnemonic device and it's like it's checking yourself, right? So it's like illness, medication, stress. Sometimes that S is sleep. Honestly, there should be two S's and it should be both. I can see how they're related. But anyways, that whoop would really give that S of the I'm safe checklist an actual number and measurement to it. Throw that out there. I highly recommend pilots that if they don't get enough sleep to really consider not flying. Just straight up, like we've talked about it today, just all the effects, on cognitive and physical abilities, just missing. And we all know missing one checklist item could result in something bad. So I just want to throw that out there. Yeah, just a safety
Yeah.
tip.
We also are not always the best judge of how we're doing because
Mm.
we're humans quite often. We like to push, we can do this, I can get through this, I've got this,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
The other thing too is when you're getting sick. Like during COVID with the Whoop, they found out. So Pro Golf Tour, one of the guys saw his stats and it was day 2 of the Pro Golf Tour and he saw his stats. He was feeling fine. He's like, I would have, had I not had the Whoop, I would have gone on tour. I would have gone. He goes, I had slightly tired. He goes, but I thought it was jet lag from the time difference of going to this tournament. And he ended up like his stats were tanked. And so he's like, give me a COVID test. And he ended up having COVID that now like the PGA like actually hands out whoops to everybody, like caddies, like anybody working on the golf tours. But what Whoop did studies and they found out that 20% of people that were asymptomatic showed signs with a dropped HRV or was the respiratory rate dropping is the respiratory rate that drops or that increases. The respiratory rate increased for them 20% of people before any symptoms, and then 80% of people the day that symptoms started.
Wow. So it's like a whoop is like a COVID test.
In a sense, it's a reason to go and take a COVID. Like it was a
Right.
reason.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That was the thing. I was like, wow, if more people had this, then you'd know, okay, I shouldn't go out of my house today. Like I really shouldn't be going and doing these things, even though I'm feeling okay,
Mhm.
because that's when you can spread it. So just understanding like you can see when illnesses are happening. My son wears my other Aura ring, my old gen, and it's like we can completely tell when either of us is about to get sick. I'm like, oh, our HRV just completely dropped last night. Kind of feeling a little tired, but we were just going to push through, but we don't. And we're usually sick by the end of the day.
Yeah. And I'm so glad you said that the human ego or whatever you want to call it element to not being the best judge of our own actions and things like that, because it's just like with like dieting, if you don't, or with anything, I always say, you can't improve what you can't measure. And so like dieting, right? If if you want to lose weight, you got to have a deficit in calories. And if you're not counting your calories, then like I've literally done this. Like I'll be like, okay, I can like I don't need to like write it down. Like I can judge, but then I find when I don't write it down and do that I pick up little things here and there that I'll eat that I don't count. You know what I mean? And it's like so that like just leave it to the numbers to tell you and don't, that the
Yep.
truth is in the numbers.
I think as well, though, too, as a society, we just push. We push all the time. Like we push ourselves to such an extreme that a very large majority of people are burning out.
Mhm.
And they're not seeking help for burning out because all their friends, all their colleagues are also feeling as tired as them and as exhausted as them that just has become people's norm.
Yeah. Especially in like, well, you're in Canada, but Canada, I'm sure included in this. But yeah, like in the US, North America, like it's such a culture of like work and burnout. Wow, that's awesome. Well, anything else that you want to talk about or add to anything that we talked about?
There was something that did pop in my mind is for when breathing as well. There are different ways of breathing to actually give you energy. Like there's certain ones that are called like a shot of energy, like a shot of coffee. So these are things that you can actually do in flight. If you do start feeling yourself getting drowsy,
Wow.
is change to a type of breathing. So as I was saying earlier, circles, you do a bunch of circles. Now, I would never, do not, I'm putting a huge disclaimer here, do not try this in flight until you have done it enough times at home because it will actually give you the shot of energy, but you might get a little bit of lightheaded. So you need to figure out where your levels are at of what is good for you to just get a boost of energy without getting lightheaded. But it is doing circles, inhale, exhale through your nose. It can even be through your mouth.
What do you mean by circles? The square made sense to me because it was like do steps, right?
There's no pause.
Oh, I see. So the corners are like the pause.
Yeah, there's no pause in a circle. With the square, it's you're inhaling and then you exhale is the top line. Then the bottom, the right side is a inhale. You're going up, exhale across, inhale, pause, exhale, pause. That's a square. Sorry.
Gotcha.
So
We're going back to first grade shapes.
with the square, there's a pause in between the inhale and the exhale. With the
Gotcha.
circle,
No pause. Okay.
so you do a bunch, and that's where you'll find out. Is it 10 for me? Is it a couple of minutes of inhales and exhales? And then you just go into like a little triangle or something, and you should feel your energy increased. So that is a great way too, that if you are in flight and you are starting to feel a little bit tired, to help to increase your focus and your energy. I'm sure that if you Google like a breathing pattern to increase energy and focus, I'm sure that tons of videos will pop up.
Very cool. Just practice before you fly. That's a good rule for everything.
Yes.
Cool. Wow. I've always been fascinated by sleep. And luckily, I haven't had, other than just getting too much into that work culture and kind of, maybe getting close to that 6 hours sometimes when I'm busy, times when I'm busy. But other than that, I feel like I haven't had too many problems with sleep. But I've always been interested in, like I said, I think I listened to a podcast and this PhD guy just says some mind-blowing stats on the power of sleep. And so I've always just been really interested in the effects. And then, like I said earlier, we want to be pilots, especially general aviation, any pilot, just like any advantage that we can give ourselves or any disadvantage that we can avoid prior to flight I think it really could be the difference between life and death, as crazy as it sounds. And I know with first responders, you know all about that. So really good conversation.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. If we can help even just one person just make it through their career stronger, then hey, we've done our job.
Yeah, so that story of the first responder with the HRV and all that stuff that you helped out, if someone out there is like that, how could they reach out to you and maybe see what kind of talk to you more or see your stuff, or how can they get in contact with you?
Yeah, so my main website is andiclark.com. Andi is with an I, so ANDICLARK.com. Go on that site, everything's there. You can get into my podcast. I have switched my podcast name and not on my website yet. The name is now Calm Night Strong Days.
Calm Night Strong Days. And is that on all the podcast platforms?
On everything, even YouTube, any podcast channels, it's everywhere. And there is a whole section actually on trackers as well on that podcast. That was my last series that I did do on the podcast, which is the part you will see on my website at the moment, if it hasn't changed before you go and look at it. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. And then are you on social media?
Yeah, everything is on my website. Like in the corner, you can get Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube. Everything is on my website.
And do you do like one-on-one like training or consulting or whatever for this stuff?
Yeah, I've gone back to doing one-on-one. I did group, and just things are so individual with everybody. At life, your stage of life, what's going on, like exactly. If you think of pilot, like what type of pilot are you? What is your flight schedule? What time zones are you going? Like it's so different in all of them.
Yeah, cool. That makes sense. That'd be tough.
Yeah.
To reach multiple people in a topic or whatever, because it's so individualized.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you so much. I learned a lot, and hopefully I'm sure everyone else did. I can't recommend if you're struggling with sleep, figuring that out, because I think the benefits of getting that figured out will be immense for not only your training, but just life in general. So thank you, Andi. And that's it for the episode. So we'll chat with everybody next week. Thanks.